I'm Candace Rose. I'm the founder of Female Collective. I'm presenting Stephanie's film today, and Stephanie's the director. And we also have Logan and Jack, two of the actors in the film. And Natalie, the production designer. So Stephanie, I read that this was a film based on a short story called Where Are You Going and Where Have You Been? And this was written in the 1960s.
Yeah.
So what drew you to the story and to like also make it modern and not keep it in the 1960s feel?
Totally. I think that so I feel like the film has a lot of different interpretations, but specifically speaks to the feeling of being a woman in these types of interactions in which the power dynamic is like inherently imbalanced. And Joyce wrote the story in the 60s. It's like about a real serial killer, or based on a real serial killer, who would like go around and pick up on young girls. And I feel like maybe the interaction was common or specific to a certain population or when she wrote the story, but now that we are like asked so often to interact with strangers on like a daily basis, I thought it would be interesting to bring that into the like a modern context.
Also, as a woman director and storyteller, do you feel as if it's your duty to share narratives that bring awareness to the many issues that women face on a daily?
Yes, yeah, I think that, like for this film, I feel like it's a female story, but done in kind of a way that's more abstracted into this form that makes it like almost like a fairy tale, like about women, like a type of story that can be told many different ways over and over, but in different contexts with like similar, everyone brings their own interpretation to it. So that's what I thought was interesting about, like having the story be very contained. Like it's a very simple plot, not a ton happens, but like a lot happens in that like one powerful moment.
So this is like a question that you guys can all answer. So I see in the film like there's this social media, you see like, you Logan posts like the photos and he gets all the likes and stuff like that. So I want to know, like, since social media is such a big part of our lives, like has it affected you guys in a weird way, like being on there? Do you guys feel like can't share too much, or do you share a lot, or do you just like want to be vulnerable? Like how do you guys think of social media?
I just got rid of all mine like a few days ago. Yeah, it feels great. I mean, it's taking up a lot of my time. Yeah.
So, no, that's great.
Should I say?
Yeah, please.
I like it just, it's a great way to meet people and connect and get inspired, but I really like it in the sense that I personally don't share that much, so that when people meet me, it's kind of like this great, in a way it's almost like, I don't know, like a fake persona or acting. It's like you can put up what you look like or this, and then people can meet you and they're like, oh, okay, this is what you're actually interested in. It's kind of nice to build like another persona and people get to meet you. It's like this, it's fun to make like a multi-dimensional personality.
Yeah, I think that also speaks to the film because she uses social media as a platform for kind of like it very much highlights the presumed rebelliousness and maturity of a teenager who thinks she has this kind of like safety in expressing herself online to a certain degree, and but the reality is like she's very innocent and young. I don't know.
Like I sort of saw the film as like a coming of age film for like teenagers and like women and stuff like that. So I was wondering as a woman who like would express herself, sexuality and everything like that online, and then like as a male would take it as like, oh, now she's like a sex object, I can take advantage of her. So how do you why was that a topic you wanted to share in the film, and like how do you feel about it personally, like that?
Yeah, I think this kind of, that's really interesting, because yeah, I think, well, the tagline for the film is, he followed her and she liked it. So it is kind of playing off this idea that like she was feeling like this level of comfort in expressing herself in that way, and but that's actually like in some ways made her possibly vulnerable to having like the wrong type of person being attracted through that, when she thinks that it's just like an outlet for her self-expression. So I need to think on the rest of that, but it's a good question. Do you have anything? Does anyone else have?
Okay.
I'll ask some more. Yeah.
So like, what do you want the audience to walk away after seeing this film? And like, all you guys can answer this question as well.
I've never thought of that. I'm like, what would I want?
I want them to be terrified.
Afraid of internet stalkers. Well, I think, actually,
We can do
yeah,
like,
I'm kind of
we
interested
can
to
put
hear
it out.
on like putting it out to the audience and seeing what
Yeah.
your interpretation of it was, because there's like a number of different ways
What
that.
do you guys think of the movie?
Yeah. Did you relate to any of it?
I hope
I hope
So, in your or in any of the interpretations, why does she get in the car with him?
Well, would you be open to suggesting what you think was happening, like when she comes out of the house? There's no,
I mean, I
you want, yeah.
didn't find it that believable, which I mean, it's not, it's fairy tale, right?
Right, like that she would go with him.
Yeah.
What were your reasons for thinking that she had like a choice?
Because she has a phone, she has access, I mean, horror movie trope, she has access to a phone and she has a door that would lock and he left her alone. And
Right, totally. That's interesting because when I first read the story, like in high school, we had a discussion in our class, and a lot of the boys were like, I don't understand why she would even engage with this person. Why wouldn't she just immediately think that he's creepy and like run inside and slam the door and lock it and call the cops or whatever? But and all of the girls kind of reacted in the opposite way of being like, I totally understand why she would like continue to engage with him and like kind of like placate him and like yeah, because she doesn't want to be impolite. So there's a certain level of that like going on kind of the whole time, and the idea is that he is asserting his power in like a very subtle kind of way that is more mental than it is like physical. Like it's not the physical threat that is like at the that's like at the base of the interaction. It's more like the manipulation and the kind of like yeah.
I also on that note, I also feel like just from experience, they're in the also like the character herself, she doesn't have the tools. Like no one gave her the tools on how to handle this interaction. Maybe it's her first interaction with this guy, and so yeah, like I definitely feel like even in this world as a woman, like your parents, you don't grow up and your parents say, oh, you know, avoid these people or don't do this, and you kind of just end up falling victim because it's habitual and that's what, you know.
Yeah, and you don't have the experience to know better yet.
Yeah.
And like in this, she's in her house, like she maybe doesn't have her phone, and her parents aren't there, so she has no protection. She's like alone. She literally doesn't have the resources to like protect herself. So in my interpretation, she's, well, yeah.
I just want to add something, like, you guys, like, you know, I feel like as a woman especially, but I mean, like, when I go out and a guy, like, comes up to me and says something, I politely will, like, laugh or, like, smile just because I'm like, I don't want him to, like, attack me later or something like that. I feel like it's just naturally, we just, like, are like, oh, let's be polite as women so, like, a guy won't hurt us.
Yeah.
And it's like, even as, like, I'm turning, like, 30 next month, I'm still that way. It's like, but I'm just now getting to the point of, like, I don't have to be nice if I don't want to. I don't have to smile. So I think it's that interpretation too as well. Okay, next.
So can you speak to the duality of that she
wants to perform as a sort of a sexual object, like that is in her power to do so, but
Right.
also, and to want attention, but not the wrong type of attention.
Yes.
When the car pulls up, she says, oh shit, and she puts some lipstick on.
Yes.
Yeah.
She is performing, there is a very Lolita type image on the screen.
Yeah.
So you have to acknowledge, and she puts images of herself online. And that, I find sometimes we get pinned, like women get pinned into, you either like turn all that stuff off, or it's a floodgate, and whatever you
Right.
get, you get. If you want attention, then you're gonna get the wrong. What if she kind of thinks he's cute at first? What if he's innocuous at first? If
Right.
he's a strange figure and he shows up, he's not dangerous yet.
Right.
He becomes dangerous through their interaction, and no amount of preparation can really, like, I was never prepared for that either, that these sometimes dangerous situations come from situations that started feeling really good.
Yeah.
That you actively perform in, and then they start to derange, and you don't understand that because you're not the one in power of how that unfolds.
Yeah.
And he does say to her that how are you going to call? She says, I'm going to call the cops. How are you going to do that? So he's sort of telling us that she has no options. He says, your parents aren't here. You don't have a phone. There's nowhere to go. He is totally in control of, like, there's no houses to be seen around,
Yeah.
so we feel her isolation in that way. And that is, I don't know, that's not a question.
No, definitely not. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I also think that the interaction was going well. She was intrigued by it up until it became dangerous. And it's like hard to even know, it's so subtle that when that is even happening. And it's not necessarily physical when that's crossing the line. And like he's kind of like feeding her breadcrumbs the whole time. Like it's a little bit like flowing back and forth between their power, like where sometimes she holds it, sometimes he holds it. So it is like, it's not completely like unfair for, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say really, really well done and so well acted, and production values were really amazing. And I know the story really well, and what I was so intrigued by your ending is that break from when she's completely broken down to that sort of surprise when she comes out very virginal in the white. And I almost felt that she was offering herself very deliberately as a victim for all girls, in a sense, to be taken away by him. And it was, in a way, a very powerful act that she got in the car. And I think that's different than the short story and how the short story ends. So I think it's a really interesting ending that you've created for her.
Yeah, I intended for her to have some sort of agency in coming out, like as like kind of, I'm not going to be the victim, I'm sort of choosing my own fate, and it's unknown, but in a way that's empowering in itself.
Yeah.
I thought the music was like really great and also like played a very strong role in the film. What was your inspiration for it, and who did it, and why did you choose that person?
James Ferraro did the score. He's an experimental pop musician. And I mean, we've worked together before, and I think like we listened to some like 80s kind of soundtracks like Heathers and Dead Calm, and like wanted something that was like propelling the story, but also like very stylized and kind of placed you in a certain era and like genre. So that's kind of what we were working.
I am writing a short film right now, kind of about sexual harassment also, and people that I've shown it to have brought up to me like, like in the Me Too movement, don't you like hate showing a woman as weak? And I think like this was a really good way of like showing like, yes, like they don't have to be weak just because they're being manipulated at this like vulnerable time in their life. And like I was wondering if you had any like restrictions while writing it, like you felt like you needed to portray her in a different light, or if you just like had any like, I don't know, like I feel like you told this in like the most honest way, like this 16-year-old girl is not gonna have the tools to stand up for herself and kind of speak her mind. Like she's going to think like this, you know, like she thinks she has a choice in this. And like, did you feel like you wanted to alter it at all to like make her like feel like, I don't know, did you have that the back in your mind like how women would be watching it, I guess, and like mad that they would be portrayed that way.
No, definitely. It was kind of a challenge to be very much like with her without like critiquing her. But it's so natural for like teenagers to be kind of imperfect in that way and like experimenting with things and like have attitude and be, yeah. So that's a really good question. Let me think about that.
I feel like since we're really good friends, that I was there through her writing process, and I do feel like you were conscious of that. You were like, does she come across as like, you know, someone who is making a decision and not just a trope of a character?
Right.
Yeah. So.
Which it was beautifully done. Yeah.
Thank you.
I just want to say it was gorgeous, and Natalie, I'm a big fan of your work, and I thought it had this cool, timeless quality, so I wonder if you could speak to that. I saw Stacy Nishimoto did the costumes, and I love her so much, so if you could talk about your visual interpretation of the story.
Steph?
Oh, it's
Well, first of all, Stephanie is one of my best friends, so we kind of have worked together before, so I feel like I just know what she wants a lot of times. But we're trying to blend this like 80s aesthetic with like the cell phones and modern world, so I don't know. I feel like she said, a lot of the movies that we had as references. And
yeah, just I think the sense of timelessness, which goes with like the quality of the rest of the film and like shooting on film, but also like carrying over the modern stuff, and a lot of that was to like the fairy tale aspect kind of that I said is to like keep it in its own world, but also like relevant to any time.
yeah, what I love about her work is that she creates her own world, so you kind of it doesn't exist in like reality. So like some of the questions don't necessarily like matter because it's like, well, it's fake, it's cinema.
But just to speak to Natalie's like talent with that, she did completely transform like the house in every way, including the exterior of the house, which like almost looked very different before we shot. So
Where did you shoot?
it was in Santa Clarita, but we wanted it to have kind of like a suburban, like kind of either middle of nowhere or like southern kind of vibe, not LA.
And to make it feel kind of like the family was a little behind in their appliances and you know, kind of stuck in the 80s, 90s, even though she feels really modern.
Yeah.
I was just curious about how much you had to interact with Joyce Carlos for the rights. Like, what was that process, and did you talk to her about it? And
Yeah. I just, when I knew that I wanted to adapt it, I Googled her email address and found like a random address. I had no idea if it was even her, and I wrote her like a nice note about it, and she wrote back in like 20 minutes. She's very like internet savvy. I was shocked, and so yeah, that's pretty much the only interaction that I had, and like continued the conversation with her agent. But it was like all very easy and nice, and like I've heard that she is going to watch the film and like wants to see it. So
I'm just curious, like logistically, when you what do you tell her, like, do you tell her how long it's going to be, like, do you tell her you're going to change it, like, what kind of conversation is that like?
I mean, I didn't give her too much detail, and she didn't ask questions. I think that she's been approached about it a number of times, from what I understand, and like maybe not all of the things have they haven't come to fruition. So I don't know. She wasn't too specific.
Has anyone made the interpretation that she died? Like when she comes out of the house and she's dressed in white? I kind of felt like that could have been, because the way that the film cuts about with the burning of the film.
Totally. I mean, yeah, that's definitely a very valid interpretation. And then I think some people thought that the kind of epilogue of her Instagram photos are like almost like a memorial of like her life kind of thing. I don't know, but I really like that.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, I want to go back to my question where I said, what do you guys want the audience to, back there.
I just want to say, I really loved it. It was really beautiful. I love that story, and I found it so relevant, and I loved that it was so timeless, but there was also this, like, the sense that this is still going on so many years later, but now it's so modern. ever be the same after that interaction and after that moment, and there was like a part of her girlhood or her childhood that was lost. That really resonated.
Yeah, definitely. I think like, to me, kind of when she comes out in white is her almost like, if you look at it as a coming of age story, that's to me like her coming out as an adult and like going into the real world sort of thing, where things aren't necessarily as perfect or ideal as she had imagined when, like, from the perspective of a child who is safe in her parents' home and has that, yeah. Thanks.
Can you say a little bit about Female Collective?
Female Collective is an intersectional feminism platform online that I started about 3 years ago. So it's basically about celebrating women and supporting all women in all aspects.
Is there a website?
Yeah, it's femalecollective.org. Yeah. So what do you guys want the audience to walk away with after watching this? Like, what should we be talking about as we're like leaving? Like, what should be the conversation?
I feel like it's all the stuff that we touched on, sort of.
Like not feeling bad.
Yeah.
Just never feeling bad, no matter like, you know, I feel like even there's a part like at any point she could have just walked away and went in the house and it would have been fine, but there's always this need to like be presentable and be nice, and I think it's to walk away and know that like, yeah, she could have gone in the house, and it's totally okay no matter what you do, like whatever's the safest.
What do men take away from this?
Oh my god.
It's different.
Well, I was playing the villain, so you know, of course I'm thinking about all these themes, but I've really had a goal to be the villain. So I was thinking about being bad. Yeah.
A bit more about that. I want to know more about like the makeup and your character as a whole.
So it's based on the Pied Piper of Tucson, the real serial killer. The makeup, we were talking about it, and of course I asked, why are you gonna have my face peel off throughout the film? And she was like, well, the actual serial killer actually used to do that. He used to, he had terrible skin problems, so he'd wear this makeup. He would stuff his shoes with newspapers, and he'd walk funny, and he was very like, I think he had like rotting teeth. He was very, very disturbing looking guy.
Yeah, they colored your teeth, like
Yeah.
they yellowed them.
Right, and then we sort of realized that it's like, it's hyperbolic. It's like, that is sort of like, you know, when you have an uncomfortable situation with somebody, like, the world almost feels like it's melting, and like I was very afraid to go big like that, and she was like, no, it's good, like, that's how it feels, you know, when you're like fucking like, losing it. Yeah. Like that's, anxiety can almost feel like the walls are melting sometimes, you know, and you can hallucinate when you're really anxious. And but I don't know, I think the movie has such a strong look to it, and it's a cool, unique look. So well done, Stephanie. Yeah. No, it's cool. Yeah. It was a real pleasure watching on the big screen.
Anything else you want to say, Stephanie? Okay, thank you guys.